When 19-year-old Ethan Rodriguez walked onto America's most watched talent stage, wearing shoes held together with electrical tape and a faded shirt that belonged to his father, the cameras caught every judgmental stare from the audience. Nobody expected that in less than 60 seconds, this forgotten kid from the wrong side of Dallas would deliver a performance so powerful that it would break the internet and change his life forever. Ethan had spent his entire childhood being underestimated. Growing up in East Dallas with his single mother, Carmen, who cleaned office buildings from midnight to dawn just to pay rent on their cramped one-bedroom apartment, Ethan learned early that life wasn't fair. While other kids got dropped off at school in SUVs, Ethan walked 4 miles each morning, his backpack heavy with textbooks that were falling apart and his stomach empty because lunch money was a luxury they couldn't afford. At Roosevelt High, Ethan was practically a ghost. He sat in the back corner of every classroom, never raised his hand, and ate lunch alone in the library where the librarian, Mrs. Patterson, pretended not to notice when he sneaked crackers from his backpack. His classmates saw him as the weird, quiet kid whose clothes never quite fit right and whose shoes squeaked when he walked down the hallway. But what they didn't know was that every night, after Carmen fell asleep exhausted on their second-hand couch, Ethan would sit by the window of their apartment and sing. Not just any singing, but the kind that seemed to come from somewhere deeper than his chest, somewhere that held all the pain and hope and dreams he couldn't put into words. His voice was his secret sanctuary, the one thing in his life that belonged entirely to him. The bullying started in sophomore year when Tyler Brooks, the quarterback whose father owned half the car dealerships in Dallas, decided that Ethan was an easy target. It began with small humiliations. Tyler would knock books out of Ethan's hands in the hallway, trip him in the cafeteria, and lead his crew in mocking Ethan's thrift store clothes. The worst part wasn't the physical harassment. It was the way Tyler made Ethan feel invisible, like he didn't deserve to take up space in the world. One particularly brutal day, Tyler cornered Ethan after school near the dumpsters behind the gym. With his friends recording on their phones, Tyler ripped Ethan's backpack open, scattering his homework across the wet pavement, and shoved him hard against the brick wall. That's when something inside Ethan finally snapped. Without thinking, without caring who was watching, he started to sing. Not loudly, not dramatically, just a soft, haunting melody that seemed to pour out of his soul like water from a broken dam. The effect was immediate and startling. Tyler stopped mid-shove. His friends lowered their phones. Even the birds seemed to pause in the trees above. For those 30 seconds, Ethan's voice transformed the ugly moment behind the school into something sacred and beautiful. But when the song ended, Tyler quickly recovered his composure, laughed it off, and walked away with his crew, leaving Ethan alone with the scattered pieces of his dignity. That night, Carmen found Ethan crying at the kitchen table, his homework ruined and his spirit broken. For the first time in years, Ethan told his mother everything. About Tyler, about feeling worthless, about wanting to disappear. Carmen, who had worked 16-hour days and never complained once, sat down across from her son and took his hands in hers. She told him something she had never shared before. His father, who died when Ethan was 3, had been a singer in local clubs before he met her. She said that sometimes, late at night, she heard echoes of his father's voice coming from Ethan's room, and it made her believe in magic again. The next morning, Carmen did something that shocked Ethan. She called in sick to one of her jobs and drove him to the downtown Dallas auditorium where America's biggest talent competition was holding open auditions. She had saved $300 over 6 months, money that was supposed to go toward fixing their broken air conditioner, and she handed it to Ethan as his entry fee. Standing in line with hundreds of other hopefuls, Ethan had never felt more out of place. Everywhere he looked, he saw people with professional headshots, designer outfits, and confident smiles. A girl named Madison Spencer, who looked like she stepped out of a magazine, was warming up with vocal exercises that sounded like they cost more per lesson than Ethan's family spent on groceries in a month. A young man named Chad Williams was getting his hair touched up by what looked like a personal stylist while his manager discussed strategy on his phone. When Ethan's number was finally called, he walked into the audition room wearing the same clothes he had worn to school that morning. His shirt, which had once been navy blue, had faded to an uncertain gray, and there was a small tear near the left shoulder that Carmen had tried to mend with thread that didn't quite match. His shoes, a pair of generic sneakers from a discount store, had holes in the canvas that he had covered with electrical tape, creating a patchwork pattern that told the story of too many miles walked and not enough money for replacements. The judges took one look at him, and their expression said everything. They had no idea they were about to witness something that would leave them speechless. The four judges, America's most famous music industry executives, sat behind their imposing desk looking like they had already made up their minds. Judge Rebecca Morrison, a pop superstar with 20 Grammy Awards, glanced at Ethan's appearance and then at her watch. Judge Antonio Martinez, a legendary producer, leaned back in his chair with the expression of someone who had seen 1,000 wannabes that day. Judge Sarah Chun, a country music icon, offered a polite smile that didn't reach her eyes. And Judge David Thompson, a former boy band member turned talent scout, looked like he was already thinking about lunch. The production assistant asked Ethan his name and age for the cameras. His voice cracked slightly as he answered, and he could hear someone in the crew chuckle. Judge Morrison asked him what he would be performing today, and when Ethan said he would be singing an original song, Judge Martinez actually rolled his eyes. But then something extraordinary happened. Ethan closed his eyes, took a breath that seemed to draw from the deepest well of his experience, and began to sing. The song was called Invisible, and it told the story of every kid who had ever felt forgotten, every dreamer who had been told they weren't good enough, every person who had learned to find strength in their pain. His voice started soft and vulnerable, like a confession whispered in the dark. He sang about walking through life unseen, about hunger that went beyond food, about holding on to hope when hope seemed foolish. But as the song built, so did the power in his voice. What started as a whisper became a roar. What began as vulnerability transformed into unbreakable strength. The change in the room was palpable and immediate. The camera operators stopped adjusting their equipment and just listened. The sound engineers forgot to check their levels. The judges, who had been shuffling papers and looking distracted, slowly stopped what they were doing and gave Ethan their complete attention. Judge Morrison's mouth fell open slightly. She had heard thousands of singers, worked with the biggest names in the industry, but there was something in Ethan's voice that she had never encountered before. It wasn't just technical skill, though his control was remarkable. It wasn't just emotion, though every word seemed to come from a place of authentic experience. It was the rare combination of raw talent and genuine heart that made superstars. Judge Martinez leaned forward in his chair, his earlier dismissive attitude completely forgotten. As someone who had discovered some of the biggest names in music, he recognized immediately that he was witnessing something special. This wasn't just a good audition, this was the kind of moment that changed careers and created legends. Judge Chin found herself fighting back tears. The song seemed to tell her own story, the story of every person who had ever felt like an outsider. Ethan's voice carried the weight of real experience, the kind of authenticity that couldn't be taught or manufactured. Judge Thompson, who had been in the music business for over 20 years, felt goosebumps rise on his arms. He had forgotten that music could affect him this way, that a single voice could transform a sterile audition room into a sacred space. When Ethan finished the song, the silence in the room was deafening. For a moment, nobody moved, nobody spoke. Even Ethan opened his eyes uncertain, wondering if he had done something wrong. Then Judge Morrison stood up. Then Judge Martinez. Then Judge Chun and Judge Thompson. The entire judging panel gave Ethan a standing ovation, something that happened maybe once in an entire season of auditions. Through tears she didn't try to hide, Judge Morrison told Ethan that in 25 years of music, she had never heard anything like what she had just experienced. Judge Martinez said that Ethan didn't just sing the song, he lived it, and that kind of authenticity was what the music industry desperately needed. Judge Chin said that Ethan's voice reminded her why she fell in love with music in the first place. And Judge Thompson said that he had just witnessed the birth of a star. All four judges voted yes, sending Ethan to the next round. But more than that, they did something unprecedented. Judge Morrison asked if she could hug him, and when Ethan nodded, still in shock, she whispered in his ear that he was going to change the world. The video of Ethan's audition was posted online that same evening. Within 6 hours, it had 1 million views. Within 24 hours, it had 10 million. Within a week, it had broken every record for talent show auditions, reaching over 100 million views and becoming the most shared video in the platform's history. Suddenly, everyone wanted to know about Ethan Rodriguez. The boy who had been invisible his entire life was now the most talked about person in America. Music industry executives flew to Dallas to meet with him. Talk shows begged for interviews. Record labels offered contracts worth millions of dollars. But success didn't change who Ethan was at his core. When he signed his record deal, the first thing he did was buy his mother a house. Not a mansion, just a simple 3-bedroom home in a safe neighborhood with a garden where Carmen could grow vegetables and a porch where she could sit and rest after all those years of working multiple jobs. Ethan's debut album, titled Invisible, went straight to #1 and stayed there for 12 weeks. Every song told a story of struggle and triumph, of finding your voice when the world tries to silence you. The album resonated with millions of people who had felt overlooked, undervalued, or forgotten. But perhaps the most powerful moment came 8 months after his audition, when Ethan returned to Roosevelt High School for a special assembly. Walking into the same gymnasium where he had once been ridiculed, now as one of America's biggest recording artists, Ethan could have chosen to gloat or seek revenge. Instead, he chose grace. He performed 3 songs for his former classmates, including Tyler Brooks, who sat in stunned silence in the front row. After his performance, Ethan spoke to the students about his journey. He talked about the pain of being bullied, the temptation to give up, and the importance of staying true to yourself even when the world tries to convince you that you're not enough. He looked directly at Tyler and said that he harbored no anger, that Tyler's actions had actually helped him find his strength. He said that sometimes our greatest challenges become our greatest gifts, and that every person in that room had a voice worth hearing, dreams worth pursuing, and a story worth telling. Tyler approached Ethan after the assembly with tears in his eyes. He apologized for his cruelty and thanked Ethan for showing him what real strength looked like. It was a moment of forgiveness that demonstrated that success isn't just about achieving your dreams, it's about becoming the person you were meant to be along the way. Today, Ethan Rodriguez is more than just a successful recording artist. He's a symbol of hope for anyone who has ever felt invisible, a reminder that your circumstances don't define your destiny, and proof that sometimes the most beautiful voices come from the most unexpected places. His foundation, also called Invisible, provides music education and resources to underprivileged youth across America. Every year, hundreds of young people who might otherwise never have the opportunity get to develop their talents, find their voices, and discover that they are anything but invisible. Ethan's story teaches us that talent doesn't come wrapped in expensive clothes or perfect circumstances. It reminds us that the people we overlook, the voices we dismiss, the dreams we consider impossible might just be waiting for their moment to shine. Most importantly, it shows us that our greatest struggles often become the foundation for our greatest triumphs. The boy who once walked 4 miles to school in shoes held together with tape now travels the world inspiring millions. But he never forgot where he came from, and he never stopped believing that every person has a song worth singing, a story worth telling, and a light worth sharing with the world. In a world that often judges by appearances, Ethan Rodriguez proved that true greatness isn't about what you wear or where you come from. It's about the courage to be authentic, the strength to persevere through adversity, and the faith to believe that your voice matters, even when no one seems to be listening. Sometimes the most powerful moments come from the most unlikely sources. Sometimes the person everyone overlooks becomes the one everyone remembers. And sometimes all it takes is 60 seconds of courage to change your life forever.